Welcome to another lesson in Adobe Illustrator. Today we're going to be talking about the gradient tool and how to adjust gradients. Gradients are it's a type of fill that will transition from one color to another. You can actually add pretty much an infinite amount of colors to a gradient, so you can transition between three colors if you need to. Some of the things you want to know where they are with this tool is you want to know that there is an actual gradient tool in the toolbox, and it looks like a picture of a gradient. So when if I have a selected object on my screen and you click on the gradient tool, it shows you where the gradient goes. Now this gradient goes from, it's a radial gradient that starts here and ends way out here. If you click and drag an area, you can see that the gradient encompasses that area, and then once it's beyond, it'll stay the same color. If you click and drag a short area, the whole gradient will be in a small spot. If you click and drag even off the object, the beginning of the gradient could begin outside the project. So it's all clicking and dragging. This is a radial gradient. There are three types of gradients in Adobe Illustrator. So the linear gradient, if I select linear gradient, so I'm over here in the properties window, I can switch this to linear gradient and click and drag. You can also see if you have the control bar up here at the top, you can get the same tools up here. And linear gradient works in a straight line. So you can see this when I click and drag a small area, the whole gradient is going to end up in a small area. If I click and drag a longer, it'll be a smoother transition. Now, how do you edit your gradient? There's a couple ways to do that. One, if in the gradient tool, you can click actually on the little color sliders, and I can change the color in a color window or by selecting a swatch. So I could click on a color, and then I could change the color here, and now I have a completely different gradient. So that's one way to do it. There's also a gradient window. So if you go to Window and go down to Gradients, you'll have a gradient window open. Now it says I have it open here somewhere, so it's tucked away down here. And in this window, you will see the tools we just talked about. You can actually type in a specific angle. You can also add or subtract colors on your slider here. So this is the slider that shows the gradient, and if I click directly underneath it here, I can add a color to it, and I can pick, yellow or whatever, and it'll change the gradient. So let me select the object first, and I'll add yellow to it, and you can add as many as you want, and that's simply by clicking underneath the little color bar and adding a color to it. If you want to get rid of a color, you can just click and drag away. Okay, so that's how you can change gradients in Adobe Illustrator. There's also a nice tool that you might want to play around with, and it's the Freeform Gradient tool, and this is new. And when you select the Freeform Gradient tool, you can actually add different areas inside your object, and you can see how I can manipulate these areas by adding these points in here, and I can actually have like kind of a triple gradient blending from one to the other to this way. And every time you add, you can change the color of that. It does seem to take a little more power out of the computer and takes a little more time for some of these to work, but the result is fantastic, and you could do some really cool custom gradients that way as well. So there's a little mini tutorial on gradients. I hope that was helpful.